like, is Silicon Valley dying? And I had some debate with him on here too, talking about this, saying that like there's always this narrative every 10 years that like Silicon Valley is dying and it's going to go somewhere else. And so he did a great job, I think, at like showing that Austin is quite small when it comes to the amount of venture capital. So he says right there, it's a 9x gap in the money invested. I would note that like,
Dollar invested. Right.
yeah, the amount of money invested though is larger than Seattle, and Seattle is considered a pretty serious tech hub. You have both Amazon and Microsoft here, but there's more money going to startups in Austin today. So I think there's some interesting things that you can like learn from this chart. Ultimately, like I guess because you might take here, like so I wrote that like, hey, Y Combinator started in Boston 2005. I remember when that was a big tech hub, and in 20 years a lot of things can change. And so he wrote me back, and we kind of talked about, you know,
Boston is still a big tech. Right. So do you think that like VC money is a good indication?
yeah, that's a really good point. So, I mean, I wrote that like, hey, Sachs is hyperbolic. Sachs did say it'll replace SF. I think that's like hyperbole. It's a kind of a crazy statement. I don't think it's mathematically accurate based, particularly on like Peter's data here. Quantitatively, it's not going to, Austin will not replace San Francisco in a year or two. Could it replace it 10 years or 20 years? I actually think yes. And that's what I wrote was like, hey, it's got more Fortune 500 headquarters in any other state today. Texas today is number one Fortune 500 headquarters. That is recent. So like in 20 years, I think it's possible. There's a lot of things that could happen and it could not happen. But I do think that the idea that Silicon Valley is a home of high tech being permanent is not the case at all. And that it wasn't even the case 25 years ago, that like there were a few firms from Silicon Valley. And then, you and I talked about this, like you had the dot-com boom, so the 90s, and like PayPal in particular, right? And everyone's familiar with PayPal Mafia. David Sachs is PayPal Mafia. Elon Musk is PayPal Mafia. Basically, everybody that you have heard of who's big in like Silicon Valley high tech basically was involved or worked at PayPal. It's right. Incredible, actually.
Right.
Dave McClure from 500 Startups even was at PayPal, right? So you had that phenomenon, which is like .com and the PayPal IPO in particular, which just minted a bunch of wealthy people who are very excited about investing in startups. And then you had the iPhone. And that was my generation, right? 2008, 2009, iPhone emerged, and you had the iPhone ecosystem, and a lot of investment went into like iPhone apps, and companies like Uber emerged from that. Uber is probably the greatest example of like an iPhone native mobile application. It utilized GPS before anybody else was doing with it, and incredible company, right? So I think that like in order for Austin to really become a tech center of like significant clout to perhaps rival Silicon Valley, would require an event like that. It would require like an iPhone type of ecosystem. It will require like a PayPal type event. And so
I see.
There is one on the horizon.
Yes.
The SpaceX IPO. So Elon's moved, SpaceX to Austin. I guess technically Twitter and XAI is still in California, is what I read. But the SpaceX IPO, which a lot of people say will happen next year, could be the type of catalyst that brings a ton of venture capital to Austin. You'll have like one of the biggest, it may be the biggest tech IPO ever. I mean, we're not talking like a small IPO, right? It's like the size of, that's what people misunderstand too.
It's going to be like $500 billion, 500.
The PayPal one was big at the time, really big, right? Like, and they had that much money from it. So same idea here, like it's not a small one. Like this is going to be the biggest ever. And like, what will that do for Austin? Will that create a bunch of like new money that wants to go in and fund all kinds of interesting startups and is fairly Austin centric? Like, I think it's possible.
I think so. I think it's very possible, especially if Austin stays hardware focused, I think Texas could become the Shenzhen of US. It absolutely could. There
Yeah.
is lots of smart people working at SpaceX. Once the liquidity happens in a year or two, they could invest into other hardware companies. I know Andrew is also has presence in Austin or in Texas. It just makes sense. Right? I don't think Austin will replace all of San Francisco or the Valley. The Valley could stay more software driven. AI is not going to change. AI is not going to move to Austin. Um, but it could create an interesting dichotomy where AI or software happens in the Valley and hardware happens in Austin. That could be very
Yeah.
cool.